The most difficult thing about this play, it can be psychologically tasking when your actual life isn't too far removed from the experiences of the character.
Train to Bristol. I'm on my way to watch a play. It sounds a bit random, but I'll explain more. Somewhere a bit more quiet.
When Richard and I first started talking about how we could interpret Othello through the lens of understanding his, not just his religious life, but the journey that would have brought him to Venice in the context of the play. We started really thinking about what was his life before he arrived in Venice. Who was he? And the text is fascinating because it gives us a sense of a man who is worldly, who's educated, who's from royal blood, and that here's someone who was deeply embedded in religion, who was deeply embedded in Islamic culture.
Cool, so I'm outside the theatre now. I'm actually meeting one of the actresses in the play for the first time. Here she is. Yeah. Growing up, very few things traumatized me more than Shakespeare. Macbeth, King Lear, Romeo and King Juliet. Don't get me wrong, I love literature, I love theatre, but constantly learning Shakespeare at school every single year reminded me of how different my own cultural heritage was. Here I was, in a room, in a class of brown and black people, being told by a white guy about another white guy that lived in the medieval ages and how he was one of the greatest writers to have ever lived. And I found it incredibly hard to relate. Then I get a phone call from a friend about a new Othello play that was happening in Bristol, and they'd invited me backstage. And anyway, I arrived backstage, and it was perhaps one of the weirdest things I had ever seen.
Family Babylon.
So I'm now backstage of the play Othello. They're doing their warm-ups, which is basically the kind of, before they go on stage, they all have to warm up their bodies and their voices and get psychologically in the right place to perform, and it's incredible to watch. It's a little bit like you're in a mental institute, if you didn't know any better. The reason they're doing it is to really zone in and tap into their body and to really bring out the certain emotions that they might need during the play. But a part of me finds it a little bit funny.
When you guys are taking the piss, or?
He's never done that before in his life.
Anyway, I thought I'd give it a chance. I thought I'd also ask the actors if they could give me a summarized account of the story of Othello.
Story of Othello in 10 seconds, okay?
Okay.
Go.
So, interracial couple, white rich girl, black general of the army.
It's 10 seconds story about Othello, really. It's exactly 10 seconds about Othello, but I don't know the story.
Two best friends, Othello and Iago. Iago gets jealous of his best friend Iago and he decides to really fuck him up good and proper.
For me, Othello, it's full of politics. How when politics comes, destroy everything.
Time is up.
Othello بالنسبة لي هي شوفك بكرة.
I need you to summarize Othello in 10 seconds, please. 1, 2, 3, go.
Othello, a play written by a white man 500 years ago. Is it relevant today? You decide.
For me, Othello has always been a difficult play because Othello as a character I want him to be not just good, but I want his Moorishness to be noble. And I think once we started thinking about Othello as a survivor as someone who was existing within Venetian society, a society that essentially othered him and marginalized him, yet at the same time embraced him. Understanding his religious life became vital. It became clear to me that Othello had something to offer all of us, not just me as a Muslim, but all of us, in terms of telling a story of someone who struggles to maintain his essence, struggles to maintain his morality, struggles to maintain his ethics, struggles to maintain his history.
So I'm just wondering backstage. I should probably find one of the actors to do like a serious interview. I think that's what I'm supposed to do in a video like this. Maybe.
I should ask you some like serious questions, and this is what people do during interviews.
Yeah.
Do you work out?
No, not really. Not really, no.
Okay. Me neither.
You neither.
I'm gonna. How much of Othello do you see in yourself?
He's black,
Yeah.
and I'm also black.
Oh yeah. I didn't want to say that, but yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I did notice that.
You did notice?
Yeah.
Good, yes. So that's a big similarity we have.
Do you think that's why you got the role? Or?
And I mean, Shakespeare occupies such a prominence in our national identity and the work that's about us and how we see ourselves in art. Through your life has a huge stake in the state identity and yet never sees yourself represented in the state culture. I think that is a really dangerous thing.
Story that we tell about our nation. Who is our nation? Students who are from, say, Bangladeshi heritage or Pakistani heritage, North African heritage, who have grown up here and identify to some extent as British Muslim, can say this is part of our story. For me, that's the kind of great triumph, is to say there is a longer heritage here and let's not make it parochial.
Oh, I just kind of thought it would be like another Shakespeare play that I could relate to very little. But there's one scene, and it happens to be the opening scene, and it completely took me by surprise.
Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim.
نفسك إلى البحر الملؤوم بظلال القرآن وعين.
The scene, which was of a nikah, or a Muslim wedding, was taking something of my own cultural heritage and incorporating it into Shakespeare. It felt like two worlds of mine were colliding together.
قبلت نكاحا للبحر الملؤوم في ظلال القرآن وعين الرحمن وسنة رسول الله عليه السلام.
That opening scene is so important. When Desdemona and him come together to become husband and wife, it was important to demonstrate that that coming together was sacred for both of them, and it was sacred for Othello. And what's the best way in which we can talk about that is for them to take their vows as Muslims would take their vows. That's all the audience in some ways needs. Now watch the rest of the play knowing that Othello is navigating a double life that's dangerous and that's risky.
Oh my days, I can't. Can you just do your own thing? Oh my God. Oh my God. Jesus Christ.
You don't own it.
No, but do your own thing, do your own thing.
Knowing that Othello is secretly a Muslim, hiding it from his Venetian superiors, how does that begin to play with the way in which you're interpreting text? I mean, what's the process, active process you're going through as you're reading the text in terms of incorporating that?
Yeah, I think it lent itself to it very nicely, and it was a massive freedom actually, because I think actually Othello, in the sense of being able to say, well, actually no, fact, in our production he is a Muslim and he's hiding it, meant that all the little nuances in the text, I was able to really question every single word he said, knowing that actually if deep down this is what he feels, this is his love of Allah, is something that he's having to hide. Every word he says is coming through that. Every tribulation he faces, every trial he faces is through that prism of his religion and how he has to hide it and why he has to hide it.
And now we're here in London, in Wilton Music Hall, during the last stretch of the tour of the Othello production. And I'm really looking forward to it. The cast are in the other room now and they're rehearsing for tonight's show. Tonight is the opening night. And it's just all super, super, super exciting.
I've forgotten that it's 6:30. I almost.
We're doing the fight call.
I'll see if they're outside of
We're doing the very exciting fight call.
Othello, rise! I plead thee! Hold for shame! The Christian shame! Put by this pauper's brawl!
No. What's happening?
So basically what's going on right now is that there's a bit of a squabbling going on. I'm not quite sure how it started, but this is what happens when you give drink to boys, you know?
For many of us, people of color and who watch Othello, who've read Othello, is that I think we struggle with the fact that he becomes a murderer, that he eventually murders his wife, and he falls prey to the worst kind of misogyny, jealousy, patriarchy. There was a time where Othello was interpreted through the lens that here was the Moor, the black man, returning to his quote-unquote savage roots. And I think what it was important for us to show, and I think Richard and the rest of the cast have done it so brilliantly, and Abraham has done it so brilliantly as the actor playing the title role, is that when Iago engages Othello, wears him down, what is he wearing down? He's wearing down his essential morality. In many ways, I would say his Muslim morality. I would go far as to say his Islamic morality. There's this knot. I still watch it. This is knot in the pit of my stomach, as we desperately want him not to fall prey to Iago's almost satanic whispering. But when he does, what does he do? He breaks the tasbih. He breaks his prayer beads. He says, I can't be held by this anymore because I need to act on my anger, my manliness, my sense of self-worth, and the way I'm going to do that is by adopting not Christianity, but the trappings of Christian empire, of power, of the power around me, of the way people behave around me. And then we see that slide into that very, very disturbing place, the place of vengeance.
Yeah. But what do you do? I mean, what parallels do you draw from that to modern day?
You know, for me, Othello is all about power. And when I think about Iago, what I think our activist friends would term white supremacy, structures of power which marginalize and otherize, structures of power which demonize. And I think for me that is the message of Othello is writ large. It's about fake news. It's about alternative facts. It's about the Muslim ban, you know. And I think part of the fear that we feel today with the 45th president of the United States, the rise of right-wing political movements in Europe, but also intolerance in places that we come from. In a way, it mirrors what is happening in the play. The play is rife with intolerances. The play is rife with empire. The play is rife with violence. The play is rife with hatreds. And ultimately the play is rife with how all those big political, economic, and social ruptures play out in the lives of ordinary people.
He said,